In a packed federal courtroom, a woman in a wheelchair sits motionless as the judge stares at her silver star pin with unconcealed contempt. "Remove it," he demands, voice dripping with disdain. The spectators shift uncomfortably as she complies, placing her medal on the stand. The judge smirks, satisfied with her public humiliation. But what happens next will silence every person in that room. No one knew who she really was until that moment. No. One expected the document that would end his career in seconds. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If you enjoy stories of justice served, consider subscribing for more incredible true stories every week. The imposing marble columns of the Norfolk Federal Courthouse loomed over River Kingsley as she navigated her wheelchair up the accessibility ramp. Her movements were efficient, almost military in their precision, remnants of a life few in this building would recognize. The morning air carried a hint of salt from the nearby harbor, a familiar scent that momentarily transported River back to different shores, different missions. She pushed the memories aside, focusing instead on the manila folder resting in her lap. Inside were her carefully prepared notes on the faulty tactical vests that had failed to stop rounds they were rated to withstand. Vests that had cost lives. The Meridian Defense Contractor's case had drawn significant attention. As River entered the building, she noted the unusual number of military personnel in the lobby, some in uniform, others like her, now in civilian clothes, but carrying themselves in a way that spoke of their service. Ms. Kingsley, a young prosecutor approached, hand extended. "Jackson Whitley, thank you for coming today." River took his hand, noting his firm grip but inexperienced eyes. Too young to have handled many cases of this magnitude. "Your testimony could make all the difference," Whitley continued, walking beside her toward the elevators. "Meridian has the best defense money can buy, and Judge Blackwood has a reputation for being, well, defense-friendly in military contract cases." "I'm familiar with his record," River replied evenly. The elevator doors opened to reveal a crowded hallway outside courtroom 3. Journalists clutched notebooks, military officials spoke in hushed tones, and corporate types in expensive suits clustered near the entrance. The case against Meridian Defense Contractors had drawn a full gallery. River positioned herself near the prosecution table. Her tailored navy suit concealed most of the scarring along her neck and shoulders, though nothing could hide the wheelchair. The only hint of her past was the small silver star pin affixed to her lapel, a quiet testament she never drew attention to. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Ellery Blackwood," the bailiff announced. The courtroom stood in unison, all except River, who physically couldn't. Judge Blackwood's entrance was commanding, his silver hair and patrician features projecting authority. His ice-blue eyes swept the room before settling momentarily on River's seated form. Something flickered across his face. Recognition? Disdain? It vanished before she could identify it. Blackwood took his seat, adjusting his robes with practiced dignity. "Be seated." The preliminary proceedings moved quickly, charges read, opening statements delivered. Meridian's lead counsel, Thaddeus Merrick, cut an imposing figure, tall, with a shock of white hair, and the confident demeanor of a man accustomed to winning. His opening statement characterized the case as a witch hunt against an American company that has proudly served our military for decades. When Prosecutor Whitley called River to the stand, she felt the courtroom's attention shift. The bailiff approached to assist, but she waved him off politely, navigating her chair to the witness stand with practiced ease. "State your name and occupation for the record," the court clerk instructed. "River Kingsley, security consultant specializing in military equipment assessment." Merrick stood immediately. "Your Honor, we'd like to challenge the witness's qualifications." Judge Blackwood nodded. "Proceed." What followed was a methodical dismantling of her credibility. Every time the prosecution attempted to establish River's expertise, Merrick objected and Blackwood sustained. "Ms. Kingsley," Merrick continued, his voice dripping with condescension, "exactly what makes you qualified to evaluate equipment used by our elite Special Forces operators?" "I have first-hand experience with the equipment in question," River answered evenly. "First-hand? As what? A factory inspector?" Chuckles rippled through the defense table. River remained composed. In operational environments, Judge Blackwood interrupted, leaning forward. Ms. Kingsley, you speak as though you have military authority, yet you appear before my court as a civilian consultant. The prosecutor objected to the characterization, but Blackwood waved him down with an irritated flick of his wrist. Your Honor, Whitley attempted. Ms. Kingsley's full credentials are limited by classification, River interjected smoothly. I'm authorized to discuss the equipment performance, not my full background. Blackwood's eyes narrowed. This court doesn't operate on secrecy, Ms. Kingsley. The defense has the right to question your expertise if you're presenting yourself as an authority. Merrick seized the opening. Indeed, Your Honor, if the witness cannot verify her qualifications, her opinions on military equipment are merely speculative. As the questioning continued, River noticed a distinguished older man entering the gallery, Admiral Wesley Hargrove, Naval Special Warfare Command. Their eyes met briefly. He gave an almost imperceptible nod. His presence wasn't coincidental, but River maintained her focus on the increasingly hostile cross-examination. Let's be specific, Ms. Kingsley, Merrick pressed. Have you ever personally used the 15-7 tactical vest in combat conditions? Yes. And you claim it failed to meet specifications? It doesn't claim to stop armor-piercing rounds, but it should have stopped the standard ammunition that killed 3 service members in the incident I'm referring to. And which incident is that? River hesitated, glancing at Whitley, who looked equally uncertain about classification boundaries. Blackwood's attention suddenly fixed on River's lapel. Counsel, approach. The attorneys moved to the bench for a sidebar. Though they spoke in hushed tones, River could read Blackwood's body language, rigid, disapproving. After a brief exchange, they returned to their positions, and Blackwood addressed River directly, his voice carrying through the now hushed courtroom. Ms. Kingsley, are you aware that impersonating a decorated veteran is a federal offense? The courtroom fell silent. Every eye turned to River, whose expression remained impassive despite the public accusation. I am not impersonating anyone, Your Honor, she replied evenly. Then explain the medal you're wearing. Blackwood's tone carried unmistakable skepticism. It was awarded to me, sir. Laughter erupted from the defense table. Even Blackwood's mouth curled into a smirk. I've presided over cases involving Navy SEALs, Ms. Kingsley, he said, emphasizing her name with thinly veiled mockery. I know their caliber. I know what it takes to earn a Silver Star. I suggest you remove that pin before I hold you in contempt. The prosecutor rose quickly. Your Honor, this is inappropriate. Sit down, counselor. Blackwood's voice cut like steel. This court will not be a stage for stolen valor. The whispers around the courtroom grew louder. Some spectators looked away uncomfortably, while others openly stared at the spectacle unfolding. With deliberate calmness that belied the humiliation, River unpinned the Silver Star and placed it on the witness stand. The small clink of metal against wood seemed to echo in the tense silence. Blackwood nodded with smug satisfaction. Now, given your obvious limitations, let's discuss your actual qualifications. The questioning deteriorated further, with Merrick now emboldened to openly question how someone in her condition could possibly evaluate equipment meant for our nation's finest warriors. Each time River attempted to answer, Blackwood would find reason to curtail her response. In the gallery, Admiral Hargrove's expression darkened with each passing minute. He made a discreet phone call, speaking in hushed tones, before retrieving a sealed folder from his briefcase. Ms. Kingsley, Merrick continued, isn't it true that your consulting firm was paid substantial fees by competitors of Meridian Defense? No, that's not accurate, River replied. Then how do you explain— Your Honor, a commanding voice interrupted from the gallery. Admiral Hargrove stood, approaching the center aisle. Permission to approach as an officer of the United States Navy. Blackwood, startled by the interruption, hesitated before nodding curtly. Approach. Admiral Hargrove walked forward, his decorated uniform drawing every eye in the courtroom. He presented his credentials to the bailiff, who handed them to Blackwood along with the sealed folder. This witness has been appearing under a limited disclosure agreement, Hargrove stated firmly. I'm authorized to release her full service record due to this unusual line of questioning. Blackwood's face registered surprise, then something close to apprehension. He accepted the folder with visible reluctance, breaking the classified seal with fingers that seemed less steady than before. As the judge began to read, River noticed a subtle shift in his complexion, from confident pink to an ashen gray. His eyes moved rapidly over the document, widening slightly with each page he turned. Hargrove stood at parade rest, waiting. The courtroom remained absolutely still, collective breath held, as they watched Judge Blackwood's transformation from imperious to increasingly disturbed. "Your Honor," Whitley ventured after several long moments, "may we know the contents of that document?" Blackwood looked up, meeting River's gaze for the first time, with something entirely new in his eyes. Not contempt now, but the dawning horror of recognition. Admiral Hargrove cleared his throat. "With your permission, Judge, I'll summarize for the court." Blackwood didn't respond, seemingly unable to find his voice. Hargrove took the silence as assent. Lieutenant Commander River Kingsley served with Naval Special Warfare Development Group for 11 years. She completed 3 combat tours and led 27 high-value target extractions. She was awarded the Silver Star, 2 Bronze Stars with Valor, and a Purple Heart. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Commander Kingsley was gravely wounded during Operation Kingfisher 3 years ago. While extracting 16 hostages under heavy fire, she sustained spinal injuries that left her paralyzed from the waist down. Hargrove paused, turning to face Blackwood directly. "One of those 16 hostages was Second Lieutenant Marcus Blackwood. Your nephew, Judge?" Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Judge Blackwood's face had gone from ashen to nearly white, his hands visibly trembling as they clutched the folder. Twice he tried to speak, but no words emerged. Admiral Hargrove continued, his voice carrying the weight of decades of command. "Lieutenant Commander Kingsley led the extraction team that rescued your nephew and 15 others from an insurgent stronghold after their unit was ambushed. She personally covered their retreat despite sustaining multiple gunshot wounds." The courtroom had transformed. Where moments before there had been mockery and skepticism, now there was stunned silence. River remained composed, her face betraying no emotion, though her eyes never left Blackwood's. "Order!" the judge finally managed, his voice barely above a whisper. He cleared his throat and tried again. "Order in the court." But Hargrove wasn't finished. He produced a second document from inside the folder. This was declassified 30 minutes ago by direct authorization of the Secretary of the Navy. He handed it to the court clerk, who made copies for both legal teams. Communication records between Judge Ellery Blackwood and Meridian Defense executives, dating back 18 months. Communication specifically discussing how to handle any witnesses who might mention Operation Kingfisher. Prosecutor Whitley scanned the document, his expression shifting from confusion to shock, to barely contained outrage. "Your Honor, I move for an immediate mistrial on grounds of judicial misconduct. These communications indicate a clear conflict of interest and potential criminal conspiracy." Blackwood's gavel slammed down. "That is enough. This court is in recess until tomorrow morning." "With respect, Your Honor," Admiral Hargrove interjected, "I've been instructed to inform you that the Chief Judge of this district has been notified and is en route to this courtroom. These proceedings will continue today under his supervision." As if on cue, the courtroom doors opened. Chief Judge Ellington Corwin entered, his expression grave. The bailiff called for everyone to rise once more. Blackwood remained seated behind his bench, seemingly paralyzed by the sudden reversal of his fortunes. "Judge Blackwood," Corwin said quietly, approaching the bench, "I'll need to see you in chambers, immediately." As Blackwood was escorted out, his eyes met River's one last time. In them, she saw not just the fear of a man whose career was imploding, but the dawning recognition of who she truly was, and what she had done for his family. The courtroom erupted in chaos the moment the judges departed. Reporters rushed for the doors, attorneys huddled in urgent conferences, and spectators buzzed with the dramatic turn of events. Through it all, River remained at the witness stand, outwardly calm despite the storm around her. Admiral Hargrove approached. "Commander Kingsley," he said formally, loud enough for those nearby to hear, "on behalf of the Navy, I apologize for what transpired here today." "No apology necessary, Admiral," she replied. "I've endured worse." "Indeed you have," his voice softened. Marcus has been notified. He's on his way. River nodded, the first hint of emotion crossing her features. I never wanted him involved in this. He involved himself the moment he learned Meridian was being investigated. He's been trying to come forward about the equipment failures for months. Hargrove glanced toward the door where Blackwood had exited. His uncle made sure he was silenced. The court remained in recess for nearly an hour. When proceedings resumed, Chief Judge Corwin presided. Blackwood was notably absent. In light of extraordinary circumstances, Corwin announced, I am declaring a mistrial in the case of United States versus Meridian Defense Contractors. A new trial will be scheduled with a different presiding judge. Additionally, a judicial conduct investigation has been opened regarding Judge Blackwood's actions. He turned to River, his expression solemn. Commander Kingsley, the court thanks you for your service, both today and to our nation. You are excused from further testimony at this time, though you will be recalled for the new trial. River retrieved her silver star from where it still lay on the witness stand, pinning it back to her lapel with steady hands. As she wheeled toward the exit, a remarkable thing happened. A Navy officer in the front row stood at attention, then another. Within moments, every service member in the courtroom was standing, rendering a silent salute. In the hallway outside, reporters swarmed, shouting questions. River navigated through them without comment, heading for the private conference room where Whitley had suggested they regroup. She had nearly reached it when a familiar voice called her name. Commander Kingsley! She turned to see Marcus Blackwood pushing through the crowd, his face flushed with emotion. Unlike his uncle, the younger Blackwood had kind eyes, though they now brimmed with shame and gratitude in equal measure. Marcus, she acknowledged quietly, can we talk? Privately? Whitley appeared at her side, protective. Commander, you're not obligated to speak with anyone at this time. It's all right, she assured him. Lieutenant Blackwood and I have history. In the privacy of the conference room, Marcus paced while River waited patiently. He'd filled out since she'd last seen him, no longer the frightened young officer she'd pulled from that compound. I had no idea my uncle was involved with Meridian, he finally said, voice raw. When I started asking questions about the vests, about why they failed, he told me he'd handle it, that the military needed discretion, not scandal. And you believed him? He's my uncle. He raised me after my parents died. Marcus ran a hand through his hair. When I found out there was a lawsuit, that you were testifying, I tried to come forward too. Suddenly I was transferred to a base in Alaska. Every request I made to speak with investigators was blocked. River studied him. You were young, inexperienced. Meridian convinced your unit to requisition those vests despite them not meeting combat specifications. It wasn't entirely your fault. But it was my signature on the forms, Marcus insisted. 3 men died because I didn't question the supplier's claims. And you, his voice broke, you nearly died saving us from the ambush that followed. I did my job, River said simply. You've never told anyone it was my mistake, have you? All these years, you've protected me. Before she could answer, the door opened. Admiral Hargrove entered with a man in a dark suit who introduced himself as Special Agent Donovan from the Department of Justice. Commander Kingsley, Lieutenant Blackwood, Donovan said, we'd like to ask you both some questions about Judge Blackwood's communications with Meridian. It appears this goes beyond judicial misconduct. We're looking at potential obstruction of justice, witness tampering, and possibly bribery. The next several hours were consumed by detailed interviews. River recounted everything she knew about the faulty equipment, the ambush that had resulted, and her interactions with Judge Blackwood in court. Marcus, visibly shaken but resolute, detailed his uncle's efforts to prevent him from coming forward. By evening, the courthouse had largely emptied, though a few persistent reporters remained in the lobby. River declined Whitley's offer of a ride, preferring to make her own way home. As she exited the building, she found Marcus waiting by the accessibility ramp. I'm testifying at the new trial, he said without preamble. Full disclosure about the requisition process, the pressure from Meridian, all of it. That could impact your career. I don't care. It's the right thing to do. He hesitated. After what you sacrificed, it's the least I can do. River studied him, seeing not the mistake he'd made, but the man he'd become because of it. Sometimes our worst decisions lead to our best growth, she said finally. Don't waste the opportunity." As Marcus walked away, Admiral Hargrove approached, carrying a small box. "Commander, a moment." He fell into step beside her wheelchair as she moved toward the parking area. "The Secretary wanted you to have this," he said, opening the box to reveal a Navy and Marine Corps medal. "It should have been awarded years ago, but certain influences prevented it." "Blackwood," River surmised. "Among others, Meridian has powerful friends." Hargrove's expression hardened. "Had powerful friends. Things are changing rapidly since this morning." River accepted the medal with a nod of thanks. "What happens to Blackwood now?" "He's already submitted his resignation. The criminal investigation will continue, but regardless of the outcome, his judicial career is over." Hargrove looked at her thoughtfully. "You could have exposed him at any time over the past 3 years. Why didn't you?" "It wasn't about him," River replied. "It was about making sure those vests never failed another operator. That was always the mission." Hargrove nodded, understanding. "The mission continues then. The new trial is scheduled for next month. Think you're up for another round?" "Always, Admiral." For the first time that day, River smiled. "I still have work to do." Later that night, alone in her apartment overlooking the Chesapeake Bay, River placed the newly awarded medal beside her silver star on the small memorial shelf she maintained. Among the medals and photographs was a folded flag and the service portrait of Commander Ashton Kavanaugh, her team leader who had died covering their evacuation in that compound, ensuring that she and the hostages made it out alive. "Progress today, Ash," she whispered to the photograph. "Slow, but forward." Her phone rang, Whitley calling with updates. The prosecutor informed her that following Judge Blackwood's resignation, 3 more Meridian executives had been indicted. The evidence trail was expanding rapidly, revealing a pattern of cutting corners on military equipment that spanned nearly a decade. "Your testimony broke it open," Whitley said. "We've had whistleblowers coming forward all day, people who were afraid to speak before." "Good," River replied. "Keep me updated." After ending the call, she wheeled to the window, looking out at the darkening water. The naval base lights glimmered in the distance, a world she had once belonged to completely, and in many ways still did. Her body had changed, but her mission remained the same, to protect those who served. Tomorrow would bring more statements, more investigations, more battles in conference rooms instead of combat zones. But tonight, for the first time in 3 years, she felt the weight of unfinished business beginning to lift. Justice, like healing, came in its own time. The judge who had tried to strip her honor was facing his own reckoning, and the truth about Meridian's failures would finally come to light. It wasn't victory, not yet, but it was a beachhead secured, and River Kingsley knew how to advance from there. 1 month later, River Kingsley found herself navigating the marble halls of the Capitol building, her wheelchair moving smoothly across the polished floors. The congressional hearing on military procurement oversight had drawn significant media attention, particularly after the very public implosion of Judge Blackwood's career and the subsequent revelations about Meridian defense contractors. The cavernous hearing room was already filled when she arrived. Representatives from each military branch sat at long tables, alongside procurement officials and defense industry executives. Notably absent were any representatives from Meridian, whose leadership was now facing multiple federal indictments. Commander Kingsley, Congresswoman Valeria Ortiz, greeted her, extending a hand. As chair of the Oversight Committee, Ortiz had been instrumental in expanding the investigation beyond Meridian to examine the entire military procurement process. "Thank you for agreeing to testify today." "I appreciate the opportunity, Congresswoman," River replied, taking the offered hand. "Your experience provides a unique perspective, both as special operations personnel who relied on this equipment and as someone who has seen firsthand the consequences of its failure." Ortiz lowered her voice. "Not everyone is happy you're here. The defense industry has powerful lobbies." "I'm used to resistance," River said with a slight smile. When the hearing commenced, River found herself the center of attention once more, though under vastly different circumstances than in Blackwood's courtroom. Here, her full service record was acknowledged, her expertise unquestioned. She presented detailed testimony on the equipment failures that had endangered missions and cost lives. "The issue goes beyond Meridian," she explained to the committee. The current procurement system prioritizes cost-cutting over performance. Contracts are awarded to the lowest bidder, with insufficient field testing before equipment reaches operators. "What would you recommend, Commander?" Congressman Reeves asked. "Mandatory extended field testing by actual combat units before full deployment. Simplified reporting systems for equipment failures that don't get buried in bureaucracy. And most importantly, criminal liability for executives who knowingly provide substandard equipment to service members." The last recommendation caused a stir among the industry representatives present, but River continued calmly. "When a CEO makes a decision that saves money but costs lives, that should be treated as seriously as any other form of negligent homicide." During a brief recess, River found herself approached by Marcus Blackwood, now in his service uniform with captain's bars, a recent promotion following his own testimony against Meridian. "Commander," he greeted her formally, aware of the eyes watching them. "Your testimony was compelling." "As was yours last week, Captain," she acknowledged. "How are things at the Pentagon?" "Different," he admitted. "Some see me as a whistleblower, others as someone who helped bring down my own uncle. But the Procurement Reform Task Force is making real progress." He hesitated. "They're calling it the Kingsley Protocol." River raised an eyebrow. "I wasn't informed." "It's being announced today. The committee wanted it to be a surprise." Marcus looked uncomfortable. "My uncle tried to reach out to me again yesterday. And I didn't take the call." His jaw tightened. Some betrayals can't be undone with an apology. Before River could respond, Admiral Hargrove joined them. "They're ready to resume, Commander. You have the closing statement." When the hearing reconvened, Congresswoman Ortiz addressed the room. "Before our final testimony, I want to announce that this committee has unanimously approved the initial framework for what we're calling the Kingsley Protocol, a comprehensive overhaul of military equipment procurement procedures designed to prioritize service member safety and equipment reliability." Applause broke out, catching River by surprise. She had never sought recognition, only accountability. "Commander Kingsley," Ortiz continued, "you have the floor for your closing statement." River moved her wheelchair to the center position and adjusted the microphone. "Thank you, Congresswoman. I'm honored by the committee's decision, though I must emphasize that this protocol represents the collective effort of many individuals who have worked tirelessly to expose procurement failures." She paused, gathering her thoughts. 3 years ago, 16 service members, including myself, faced a situation no military personnel should ever confront. Our equipment failed at the moment we needed it most. 3 died immediately, 2 more during the extraction. I sustained injuries that ended my field career. The room was utterly silent. I'm not here seeking sympathy or recognition. I'm here because those who died deserve accountability, and those who serve today deserve better protection. The Kingsley Protocol isn't about me. It's about ensuring that when we send our people into harm's way, we've done everything possible to bring them home safely. When she finished speaking, the committee members rose in a standing ovation that spread throughout the room. Even industry representatives who had seemed hostile earlier joined reluctantly. Outside the Capitol, reporters waited with cameras and microphones. River answered their questions with the same composure she'd maintained throughout the hearing, deflecting personal praise and focusing on the procurement reforms. "Commander Kingsley," called a reporter from the back, "is it true that Judge Blackwood has been indicted on federal corruption charges?" "I have no information beyond what's been publicly reported," she replied evenly. "Do you feel vindicated after how he treated you in court?" River paused. This was never about personal vindication. It was about correcting a system that was failing our service members. I hope today's hearing marks a significant step toward that goal. As the press conference concluded, River noticed a woman standing apart from the reporters, watching intently. She recognized Elaine Blackwood, the judge's wife, though they'd never formally met. The woman approached as the crowd dispersed. "Commander Kingsley," she said quietly, "I wanted to thank you." River's surprise must have shown on her face. "Not for what happened to my husband," Mrs. Blackwood clarified. "That was his own doing, but for saving Marcus. We never knew the full story of what happened that day. Ellery kept so much from me." "Your nephew is a good man," River said. "He made a mistake, but he's working to make it right." Unlike his uncle, Mrs. Blackwood's expression hardened. Ellery was always more concerned with appearances than truth. Even now, he refuses to accept responsibility. She straightened her shoulders. I filed for divorce yesterday. I thought you should know. River wasn't sure how to respond to this unexpected confidence. I'm sorry for what your family is going through, she finally said. Don't be. Sometimes structures need to collapse before they can be rebuilt properly. Mrs. Blackwood offered a sad smile. Perhaps that's true of procurement systems and families alike. After the woman departed, Admiral Hargrove approached. Ready to go? There's a reception at the Pentagon. One stop first, if you don't mind, River replied. 20 minutes later, their car pulled up to Arlington National Cemetery. Hargrove waited respectfully as River navigated her wheelchair along the pathways to Section 60, where many of the fallen from recent conflicts were laid to rest. She stopped before a white marble headstone that read, Commander Ashton Kavanaugh, United States Navy. Silver Star, Purple Heart Operation, Kingfisher. Hello, Ash, she said softly. We made some progress today. She placed a small replica of her silver star against the headstone. This belongs to you as much as me. You made sure we got out that day. I made sure they fixed the problem. The spring breeze rustled through the cherry trees, their blossoms drifting across the immaculate grounds. River sat in silence for several minutes, remembering her mentor and friend. The Kingsley Protocol, she said finally. Can you believe that? You'd probably find it hilarious. You always said I was too stubborn to let anything go. She smiled at the memory. You were right. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the cemetery, River made her way back to where Hargrove waited. Thank you, Admiral. I'm ready for that reception now. The Pentagon was illuminated against the darkening sky as they approached. Inside, the reception was already underway, attended by military officials, legislators, and defense industry representatives who had supported the reforms. River entered to spontaneous applause, which she acknowledged with a nod before moving through the crowd to speak with key supporters. Near the end of the evening, Secretary of Defense Caldwell called for attention. Today marks a significant shift in how our military approaches equipment procurement. The Kingsley Protocol will save lives and improve operational effectiveness. He raised his glass. To Commander Kingsley, whose persistence made this possible, and to those whose sacrifices demanded these changes. Later, as the reception wound down, Marcus approached River one last time. I've been assigned to the implementation team for the protocol, he said. We'll be working with each branch to establish the new testing procedures. Good, River nodded. Keep it rigorous. Lives depend on it. I know. His expression grew serious. I wanted you to hear this from me first. I've submitted a formal statement to the prosecutors handling my uncle's case. Everything I know about his arrangement with Meridian, the pressure he put on me to stay quiet, all of it. That couldn't have been easy, River observed. Easier than living with more silence. Marcus straightened. You taught me that accountability isn't just about accepting blame. It's about creating change so the same mistakes don't happen again. You're learning, she acknowledged with a small smile. As River left the Pentagon that night, she felt a sense of completion that had eluded her since the day of the ambush. The system that had failed her team was being reformed. Those responsible were facing consequences. And perhaps most importantly, those still serving would be better protected. Her phone chimed with a message from Whitley, the prosecutor. Blackwood plea deal rejected. Trial proceeds next month. Will you testify? Without hesitation, she typed back, Of course. The battle wasn't over. Perhaps it never would be entirely, but significant ground had been gained, territory secured. As she looked up at the stars emerging in the night sky, River thought of Ashton and the others who hadn't made it home. Mission progressing, she whispered. We're not done yet. The next morning, River woke to news headlines announcing the formal adoption of the Kingsley Protocol and expanded investigations into 3 more defense contractors. What had begun as one woman's testimony against a corrupt judge and a negligent company had grown into a movement for accountability throughout the military procurement system. As she prepared for another day of interviews and planning meetings, River glanced at the shadow box on her wall containing her silver star and the newly awarded Navy and Marine Corps medal. Beside them hung a photograph of her team before the fateful mission, all of them standing, whole, unaware of what lay ahead. She touched the image of Ashton Kavanaugh, her mentor who had given his life covering their retreat. "We did it, Ash," she said quietly. "We made it count." Outside her window, an American flag snapped in the morning breeze. From wounded warrior to systems reformer, River Kingsley had found a new way to serve. The battlefield had changed, but the mission remained the same. Protect those who answer the call to defend their country by any means necessary, and ensure that those in power who failed them were held to account, no matter how high their position or how untouchable they believed themselves to be.